How many times have you found yourself wincing and cringing when you watch someone take a bad fall? Or tear up because you see someone else visibly upset at a funeral? As a professor of psychology, I discuss with my class the idea of mirror neurons and other regions of the brain, and the role they play in empathy, and how it leads to the connections that we make with others as social beings. This includes when someone is experiencing pain or sadness. Pain that others around us experience resonates in us literally as humans. As a parent, we are programmed to respond to an infant's cry. Crying is a mechanism that tells the parent something is wrong, something is painful, do something, make it stop. There is nothing we won't do to take away our child's pain. But what happens when we can't make the pain stop? Our children look to us to keep them safe and their world predictable, to ensure there are no monsters under the bed. But when the unexpected shows up, it can bring vulnerability and chaos, disrupting the most predictable of worlds. This is my daughter, Sarah, at the age of 8 in the Panama jungle, visiting the Imbara tribe with her father, Mike. Their days were spent swimming and paddling on the Chagres River, learning the crafts and culture of the Imbara, and being active participants in their world for a short while. So here is Sarah traveling and having an incredible life experience, with no indication that her life would change drastically. It was a few weeks after returning from Panama that Sarah was diagnosed with the somewhat rare disease, erythromelalgia, also known as Burning Man syndrome. Sarah experienced severe burning in both her hands and feet, and it was followed a few weeks later with the loss of some motor function due to a large nerve fiber neuropathy. Sarah was first in Burlington, Vermont, and then Boston Children's Hospital for many weeks, and it's where Sarah's care continues today. So there was no easy solution to controlling the pain, and our moments of sheer fear and panic became an almost daily experience. We took turns keeping ice packs filled for Sarah, as it was the only thing that seemed to keep the burning at bay. And this was truly a time of chaos and total vulnerability for all of us. But through this chaos and vulnerability came new connections, as well as previous connections being strengthened. And it's these connections that were demonstrated to us in so many ways throughout our experience. So although Sarah had been receiving incredible care since arriving at Boston Children's Hospital, we hadn't seen any change in her condition. One night, when Sarah had been in Boston Children's for roughly 4 weeks, I heard from the Erythromelalgia Association about a pediatric pain specialist at Stanford University by the name of Dr. Elliot Crane. I found a linen closet where no one would hear me call Dr. Crane's office, and I left a very erratic message explaining Sarah's situation and that Sarah was being treated at Boston Children's. Little did I know, I was leaving a message with the former residency colleague of the physician in charge of Sarah's care at Children's. Early the following morning, Dr. Charles Bertie, a Time magazine hero and medicine recipient, among other distinguished awards, was waiting for me outside of Sarah's room. Dr. Bertie was in his biking gear, his helmet resting on his hip. He smiled at me and shared that he received a call from a colleague of many years and that Dr. Crane was aware of Sarah's situation before my call. I felt very sheepish for a minute, but then I reminded myself, it's okay. I am doing my job as her mother. It also became apparent that things were not working in a vacuum. People were concerned, people cared, and were connecting with others to help. When looking at Sarah's case, we could have assumed that the only focus was treating the erythromelalgia, but that would be wrong. Here is an 8-year-old child who had been taken from all she knew of how the world worked and thrown into a centrifuge of doctors, nurses, tests, and medications. And this had to happen. But what also had to happen was for Sarah to connect with others on both the inside and outside of her situation to help make sense of it all. And that said, Mike and I had to do the same. While in Boston, we were given the place to stay as a gift by this wonderful family, and it was given to us for an extended period of time while Sarah was receiving treatment. And this connection came from Sarah's Uncle Kevin. Uncle Kevin knew this wonderful family who had a summer home in the Adirondacks. And this led us to Jessica. Jessica became one of those people who Sarah put faith in and trusted that there were rainbows to be found even in a downpour. Jessica made sure Sarah had fun crafts and activities during long periods of time in Boston and filled Sarah's time with crazy and fun stories. And as Sarah continued to grow, so had this relationship, a connection that developed through empathy and the desire to help. Another connection was in Sarah's hometown of Lake Placid in the Adirondack Mountains. Sarah's second-grade teacher, Natalie Colby, made the 6-hour drive to see Sarah and to bring a quilt made by her classmates, a quilt that hangs in her room still today. Family and friends also made the long drive to see Sarah, even though they weren't able to stay long due to the extensive pain she was experiencing. These visits gave Sarah strength, however, knowing that people that she cared so much about also cared deeply for her and were still with her. As the years continued, a host of new medications and treatment plans brought us to Boston roughly every 5 weeks for 5 years. And many times the trips to Boston were provided to us by Patient Airlift Services Skyhope, offering flights to and from Boston at no cost to us. And this connection came through our dear friend Maureen. And once back in Boston, staying at the home of the same kind and incredibly generous family who were there for us during our initial crisis. The connections and supports kept growing, but Sarah's condition eventually morphed into what is referred to as chronic regional pain syndrome, or CRPS. Sarah began experiencing symptoms such as significant headaches, chronic fatigue, and other issues, along with the ever-present erythromelalgia. When Sarah was 14, she was spending less and less time attending school and sleeping on average 16 to 20 hours a day, having little engagement with anyone. Every morning, we woke hopeful that Sarah would feel good today, good enough to go to school, good enough to want to be with her friends, good enough to go outside, just good enough to want to do anything. But it wasn't happening. Sarah was losing connection with all that she had worked so hard to rebuild. On one of the darkest days in January of 2018, we received a call that there was an opening at the Mayo Family Pediatric Pain Rehabilitation Center at Boston Children's Hospital. And it was here at the PPRC that the daily patterns of existence bringing little relief were going to be broken, and that Sarah would face one of the hardest challenges of her life. Sarah worked to train her brain to interpret the pain signals into something different, less malicious. Sarah was now working on making new connections within her own body. So while we worked on strengthening the connections that had weakened in Sarah's outside world, Sarah was working on the weakened connections within her own world and in her own body through daily rituals to maintain all that she had gained during her 7 weeks at the PPRC. I will state again, this was incredibly hard work. Forcing herself to go to school every day, walking and participating in activities regardless of the pain she was experiencing. going places with her friends when really all she wanted to do was go home and sleep away the pain. And it was this strategy that allowed Sarah to take back control of her life and to recognize that her pain, albeit sometimes very real and present, did not need to be the constant monster under the bed. Sarah was taught the tools necessary to overcome her fear and through mitigated and mindful steps, get back into life, a life of her choosing. So, here we are. Sarah has begun her senior year of college while living in France. I know. And behind the scenes, the Birdie Lab in the Manton Center for Orphan Disease Research at Boston Children's Hospital continue to research treatments to help manage neuropathic pain that children like Sarah experience, while also researching for the causes of these conditions. So yes, the unexpected can create chaos and vulnerability, but also allow for the opportunity for connections to be created and strengthened. Sarah's Uncle Kevin, connecting us with a place to stay and connecting us with Jess, providing a safe haven that will last decades. Sarah's second grade teacher, Natalie Colby, working to keep Sarah connected with her peers and community. The Erythromelalgia Association, providing guidance and support to us and so many others struggling with erythromelalgia. Maureen, who connected us with PALS Skyhope, providing free air transport from Lake Placid to Boston whenever needed. The Adirondack Foundation, who reached out and provided a grant from the Christopher Hollowell Fund, a fund created to support families with ill children. Why? Because it was at one time this family's heartbreaking journey. And finally, the connection of Dr. Birdie, the PPRC, and the researchers that continue to make connections throughout the world, working toward discovering cures and causes for erythromelalgia and other diseases associated with neuropathic pain in children. And it is these connections that remind us that no matter how deep in the woods we literally or figuratively are, we are by nature social beings, that when faced with seemingly impossible situations, these unsolicited connections provide new ways of looking at old problems. Connections in our relationships, in our communities, with the experts, and most importantly, the connections that occur within ourselves that allow us to live our best lives. I believe Sarah May is proof of that. So, as I stand here today with life a little calmer and the clouds clearing away, I can wholeheartedly say that it was those who reached out and connected with Sarah and us who made all the difference. We know all the reasons why people may not ask for help when they need it. But I also know we are biologically designed to recognize when someone needs help. According to the Oxford English Dictionary, the term charity originally meant Christian love for one's fellow, which I liken to love for one's fellow. We are designed to recognize when someone is in need of help. It is in our wiring, and it is truly a natural connection we can all make. Thank you.